Hey everybody, Mr. Gordon here. This tutorial is going to be how to use Tinkercad to start the CO2 car design. And I had posted a previous video on creating a Tinkercad account that you can see on your Schoology page right here. The usernames were listed. If you had a problem with that, reach out to me via email. But if you follow the directions that I posted, you should be able to get in. So to log into Tinkercad, there's a page on your Schoology page that'll bring you to the website. Make sure it opens up. Tinkercad won't run within Schoology, so it has to be in its own window. While it's opening, you're also going to want a mouse for Tinkercad. You can use it with the touchpad on your Chromebook or computer, but it's a lot easier to do if you have a mouse. All right, you can see that when I opened up Tinkercad, it automatically had logged me in because I was in previously. But once you've created an account, if you use the sign in with Google, then when you go back to sign in, you just sign in with Google again. It'll remember your credentials, and then it will open it up. So Tinkercad can do a lot of different things. We're going to use one small piece of it for now. We might do a different project with it later on. Obviously, now that school is not going to come back, we're going to have to find some things that we can do. The reason I'm bringing us into Tinkercad is because the models that we create in here can be 3D printed, and they can also be run on a CNC mill. So one of the thoughts was, if we can't manually machine our CO2 cars, at some point in time, maybe we can come back with these 3D models and we can machine them out. So I'm not sure where this is going to go, but this is the best that I could do, creating them virtually rather than, making them physically in the shop. So once you get logged in, you've got these menu options on the left. If you're in 3D designs, you should be able to click on create a new design. And as this opens up, again, the usability with a mouse is much easier. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of show you how to move around in this work plane. So this is a three-dimensional kind of basic drafting solid modeling software. If you have a mouse and you scroll up on the mouse wheel, mine zooms out. When I scroll down, it zooms in. That might be backwards for you. I'm using this on a Mac, but play around with that. When I right click and I hold the right mouse button down, it lets me orbit around in space. So between zooming in and out and holding down right click, I'm able to navigate. Now, if you don't have a mouse and you're using the touchpad, if you put two fingers on the touchpad, you should be able to orbit around in space. And if you put two fingers on the mouse pad and you bring your fingers closer together, it's going to zoom out. And if you spread your fingers out, it's going to zoom in. So that's kind of how the touchpad part works. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to rename this object. Tinkercad gives it really goofy names, but if you just click on it, you should be able to replace that with a title, CO2 car. All right, now, Tinkercad allows you to build objects using some basic blocks. So over here, I'm in the basic shapes. There's a lot of different menus, but we're going to stick with basic shapes. And using some of these, we're going to create the basic block of our CO2 car. So we're going to start with a block. So you just click and drag that block right onto the screen, and it's going to allow you to manipulate this. Now, right now, you can see that our dimensions are in millimeters. So the designs you've done are all in inches right now. Each little square on that final design is 1/4 of an inch. So by using that as a scale, you should be able to figure out the dimensions of your final design. So if we look at the snap grid, you can click edit grid, and it's going to let you change from millimeters to inches. And we need to make sure that our grid is larger than 12 by 12 because that's the size of the CO2 car. So I'm going to increase the length and width of our work plane to 14 by 14. That's going to make that little blue space bigger, and it's going to give us enough room to make sure that we can do the entire CO2 car. You can see that now the dimensions are also in inches and not in millimeters. So now that I've got my little block and I've changed my grid, you can also change the snap. So these little boxes, you know, um, are where it will snap to. You can make that finer snap, or you can increase the snap. I'm going to leave mine at a 1/16 of an inch because I think that's the smallest. Actually, a 1/4 of an inch is the smallest increment that you're going to need. So you could change your snap grid to 1/4. Now, we need to edit this block, and this block is going to be the bottom of the CO2 car. The top is angled, and we're going to use a different shape for that. But the width of our car is 1 1/2 inch. So if I drag this, I can just click on that corner and I can drag it out so that the width of it is 1 1/4. And the length of our car is 12 inches. So it's kind of messing up my width. I'm going to zoom out a little bit until I get a car that is 12 inches by 1 1/2. And it looks like that. All right, now I can move this entire block around on my plane by clicking not on one of the drag pieces and then centering it on my work plane. All right, so right now we've got the base part of our CO2 car. It's 1.5 inches by 12 inches. Now the height of this is 3/4 of an inch. So if I zoom in, I need to find my this little guy, this cone on top. This is going to allow us to, oh, that's moving it up and down. That's not doing what we want it to do. What we're trying to do is get the height of this block to 3/4 of an inch. That one's the width. That's the length. Here we go. That's the height of our block. So now our block is 3/4 of an inch tall, 1 1/2 inches wide, and 12 inches long. You're probably going to have to play around with a little bit, but you should be able to get there. Worst case scenario, if your block gets completely messed up, you can delete it and start over. Here you can see that my block is floating over my work plane. I'm not going to worry about that yet. We'll fix that later. Now the top of this block comes down at an angle. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a different piece to bring that, to make that on there. So we're going to use this wedge component. And we're going to bring that out here, and we're going to set it there for right now. Now, Tinkercad only lets you work on what they call the work plane. So now that we want to work on top of this piece, we need to change that to be our work plane. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to click on the work plane button, and I'm going to select that face of the block that we made. Now that that's our work plane, I can grab my piece and I can set it. Let's see here. We need to select top surface as our work plane, and it should let us set it on top of there. It's not working. All right, so I'm going to delete that wedge, and I'm going to bring a new wedge on and see if this works. All right, now we've got what we need. All right, I didn't have my work plane selected before I brought my wedge in, so I had to delete that other wedge and start over. Now this part we need to rotate. We're going to rotate that 90 degrees. So I'm going to click on this, and it brings up the angles, and we've got it at 90. Now I'm going to move this so that the edge, you kind of got to mess around to get the right view. The edge of this block, we want to line up with the edge of our red block. So if we zoom in, I'm holding my right mouse click down. There we go. Now I've got a good view. Then we can make the blue block 1 1/2 inches wide. It looks like we're going to have to shift this, so I'm going to change my snap to 1/8 of an inch and see if we can get that to slip over. We'll have to go to a 30, we'll go 16th. There we go. So by editing my snap, I was able to line up the wedge on top of the base of the car. So now it's 1.5 inches. So now I'm going to rotate around. Again, I'm clicking the right mouse button, and I'm going to line this up with the front corner. I'm going to get it close, and then I'm going to move in here. If you goof something up, there is an undo button up here. So you can go back and undo. But if I zoom in here and I right click to rotate around, I think I'm close. Looks like I'm off a little bit. Get the right view so we can. All right, I think we're there. So the front of the wedge lines up. It's the right width. The only other thing we need to do is edit the height of the back of the wedge. Now, the back of the car is 2 3/4 inches. The bottom part of our car was 3/4 of an inch. So what we need to do is add 2 inches with the wedge. So if I select my wedge and find the appropriate corner, I should be able to, here we go, bring the height of the rear of my wedge up to 2 inches. And 2 inches, there it is. I messed up the back corner a little bit, so I'm going to bring this back in. All right, now I think I've got everything close. The last step in this process is what they call grouping these two different blocks. And when we group something, we're going to turn it from two different pieces into one piece. So I'm going to select the top wedge. I'm going to hold in Control, and I'm going to select the bottom part. Looks like I might have to hold in Shift. There we go. I've got both pieces selected. I used holding down Shift, clicking on both of them. And then this tool up here is Group. So I'm going to group them and then click away. It turned both of the pieces the same color. And the reason that there's this piece is because the work plane is still halfway between. If I click on the work plane and select the bottom of the car, there you can see we've got the start of our CO2 car. All right, from this point, I'm going to do another tutorial to show you how to add the details and get the design of your car. But the assignment for this week is simply to use Tinkercad and create your model. Now, Tinkercad is automatically saving these things. So if I go back to the menu, it's going to show up. So if I go back to the Tinkercad menu, takes a minute to load, we will see that our CO2 car is in our 3D designs right there. That's a project we were just working on. To go back in and edit those documents, if you click on the Tinker This, it's going to open it back up. All right, so that's the first tutorial for getting started with the CO2 car blank. If you have any questions, shoot me an email, and I'll do my best to help you out. Good luck, everybody.